Hey everyone, I'm Jonah,
I'm Connor.
and welcome back to Rank and File Sports. In one of the most shocking moves of the college football offseason, Duke gave $8 million over 2 years in an NIL deal to Darian Mensah, the quarterback from Tulane last season. And they're hoping that he's going to be able to keep the program right around where they're at and potentially even improve after a 9-4 season last year. However, the schedule is going to be a bit more difficult for the Blue Devils this season. There's some really tough games on here, including Illinois, California, Georgia Tech, Clemson, and North Carolina. However, half of these games are going to be at home for the Blue Devils, half on the road. This is going to be a schedule difficulty of 5.5 out of 10.
Starting the season off against Elon, 100% chance the Blue Devils in this one. Then they will welcome the Fighting Illini of Illinois to town. Illinois is returning their starting quarterback after, similar to Duke, a very successful season. I think they went, what, 9-3, 10-3, something like that. But overall, this is going to be a very interesting game, and I think Illinois is going to be favored in this one by quite a bit, even though they will be on the road, just because they were so good last year and they have their starting quarterback returning. And if they can put all those pieces together like they did last season, this Illinois team might be competing for a spot in that Big Ten championship game. Obviously, that's going to be difficult with the juggernauts of Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon, and Michigan, all in very similar situations. But it should be interesting for Illinois. Duke, on the other hand, I this is going to be an uphill battle even at home. So gonna give them a 20% chance to get a signature win early on in the season. Then it's Darian Mensah's revenge game, going back to Tulane to face the Green Wave. Now, Tulane, I was very high on Tulane because Darian Mensah's stats. And then Jonah reminded me that Darian Mensah is now a Duke Blue Devil. Despite that, Tulane is still a very solid team. They're a very young team, and with that success last season, with Darian Mensah leading the team, they were very solid in the American Conference. They played Army in the championship conference championship game, did end up losing, but very solid team. They are returning their starting running back in Mekhi Hughes, who was a sophomore last season, average or had 1,400 yards on the ground. Receiver core is also going to be very good. So this is by no means an easy game, easy non-conference game for Duke. But I think with Mensah and what we saw with him at Tulane last year, and with Duke's ability to build around him or willingness to build around him, this Blue Devils team is going to be very competitive and going to be able to compete with this Tulane team. So we're going to give them a 70% chance to get that win on the road. Then they will face NC State. NC State was a very disappointing team last year. I don't know exactly where they were predicted, but I imagine they were predicted in the top half of the ACC standings last year after solid seasons prior, and they did not live up to that. So overall, this is going to be one of the easier games on Duke's schedule just because NC State could develop and get back to that place they were a couple seasons ago. We're going to be a little cautious with this one, but overall, Duke is going to be the favorite team in this one. They're going to be the more talented team. So a 70% chance for the Blue Devils here. Then two road games in a row going on the road to face Syracuse. Syracuse, obviously, very similar to Duke last season. They were led by Kyle McCord, having one of the best seasons last year from the quarterback position. I think led the league in passing yards, led Syracuse to a very solid record, one of their best seasons in recent memory. But now he's going to the NFL draft, and a lot of the key players that led to that successful season are gone. So I think Syracuse is going to have a little bit of a fall off, but it's still just going to depend on who is in that system and if that system can really flourish with whoever is at the helm at quarterback or whatever other skill position. And defensively, it could be the same thing. So once again, this is a little cautious Not going to be an easy game for Duke on the road, but we're going to favor them in this one just because we think Syracuse is going to fall off just a little bit more than Duke might. So giving the Blue Devils a 65% chance here. Then they have the coast to coast road trip going to face the Cal Golden Bears. Cal bringing in Devin Brown from Ohio State, competing for that starting quarterback position, along with, I forget his name and I can't even pronounce his name, but a very highly touted recruit, along with returning Jaden Ott, who is going to be the focal point of their offense. And they had a spectacular defense last year. At one point, was leading the entire college football in interceptions, I believe. One of the best secondaries. So I know a lot of those guys are also going to the NFL draft, but Cal's been able to turn out significant or very good defensive backs in the past couple of years. So I think this Cal team, along with Duke having to travel very far, it's going to be very poised to get a signature win over Duke here. So giving the Blue Devils a 25% chance to get a win going into their first bye week.
And after that first bye week, they only have one game for the second one. One of the worst setups for bye weeks out of any of the teams we've seen so far. But anyways, that game is against Georgia Tech, and we are very high on this Yellow Jackets team. Haynes King back at quarterback, and just overall, this is a very talented team. I know it's at home for Duke, but we actually like Georgia Tech here quite a bit. So it's only a 25% chance for a Blue Devils win. After the second bye week, it doesn't get much easier as they have to go on the road to face Clemson. And another factor to consider is maybe the bye weeks are hurting Duke in this case. They've only played one game since October 4th when they go play Clemson at the start of November, which I feel like players are definitely going to be cold. A lot of things might not be working as well as they should. Not going to help that they're on the road. This is a really, really good Clemson team. Cade Klubnik, one of the favorites for the Heisman Trophy next year. Just a lot of things not going to be going Duke's way in this one. Only a 15% chance of a win. On November 8th, they have their last non-conference game. This one against UConn. Actually been very solid the past few years for a group of five team, especially considering the fact that they were just one of the worst teams consistently for years. I remember looking at ESPN's bottom 10, and it was always just UConn there at the very top. They're a pretty solid team now. This one's on the road for you or for Duke. So only a 70% chance for a win against UConn. Maybe a little bit low, but it's pretty comparable to Tulane for right now. And then Virginia at home back into ACC play. I think this Virginia team is going to be pretty decent. Maybe has the capability to pull off at least one upset. Duke's definitely going to be hoping that it's not them. But overall, the Blue Devils are more talented and they should be able to win this game at home. Give them a 75% chance to win. And then on November 22nd, going on the road to face Bill Belichick and the North Carolina Tar Heels. This is one of the most difficult teams to predict this season. And throw in the fact that this is a rivalry game, this is going to be a ridiculously tough game to predict overall. I mean, North Carolina could range anywhere from like 4 to 9 wins next season. So I really don't know what to do with this one. Right now we have the Tar Heels favored. Only a 40% chance for Duke to win, but this one really could go either way. So tough to tell right now with all of the external factors affecting that game specifically. And then to end the season, it's Wake Forest at home. Pretty easy end of the season, to be honest. Wake Forest, not a very good team in the ACC, not going to be much better than last year. So I think Duke should be able to take care of business pretty easily here at an 85% chance to win.
I think the schedule as a whole, it's very difficult. Obviously, you have that tough road trip to Clemson, like you said, after that abysmal schedule Like I don't understand. That's I think one of the second or third times we've seen a team have bye week game, and it makes no sense to me. But that's a tough draw, especially with Georgia Tech being that one game in between, because that is by no means an easy game either. And on the road at Cal, this is a horrible stretch of games from October 4th to November 1st for Duke. But outside of those games, Illinois is probably their toughest game. North Carolina, there's too much going on, not enough information we know right now to really determine how good North Carolina is going to be. But this Duke team, from what we've seen in past years, I think a lot of people have underrated how good Duke has been the last 3, 4, 5 seasons, and they've always surprised people. So I could see this Duke team going anywhere from like 6-6 to getting 9, maybe even 10 wins if Mensa is playing to the elitist of levels, with those two losses being to Georgia Tech and Clemson. But overall, I think this Duke team is most likely going to end up with around 7 to 8 wins. I think 9 or 10 wins is very optimistic. Not necessarily out of the question, but 7 to 8 wins, I think, is where we'll see the Blue Devils end up.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. I think the schedule really is unfavorable for Duke, largely due to the placement of those bye weeks. So they could potentially have a very down season and maybe only win 5 games. But we do like the Blue Devils to go 7-5 for now. Obviously, like I mentioned earlier, last season they did go 9-4. Our projected win total is 6.6 wins based off of all of the percentages from the last screen. And the Vegas over under is at 6.5 with minus 162 odds for the over. So it is favored for Duke to go around 7-5 next season. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe. And we will be updating these predictions later in the off season. So make sure to come back for that, and we'll see you then.